Brandon Aiyuk may very well be on the move this offseason after he just requested a trade from the 49ers amid contract extension talks. And this story has been drawn out all offseason for the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk with multiple videos, interviews, comments about this whole situation. So today I'm going to go through all the teams that could possibly make a bid, make an attempt to get Brandon Aiyuk. And one last thing before we get into the teams, there are a few factors we have to consider. One is that if that team can pay for a contract extension for Brandon Aiyuk, anywhere from the $25 to $30 million range for one of the best receivers in the NFL makes a ton of sense. Now, this won't be a make or break factor, but we should consider that when talking about these teams. And the other factor is the 49ers are not going to trade him to a top tier NFC team. I've seen like the lines be thrown out there before for a trade candidate, but the 49ers just would not do that, especially that they're into their conference and they're one of the better teams in the conference. It wouldn't happen. So let's now get to the teams. It would be a mistake not to list off the Commanders first, as we have seen so much around the 49ers, Brandon Aiyuk, and the Commanders. We got to talk about Jayden Daniels. Brandon Aiyuk, Jayden Daniels, they are best friends. They were teammates back at Arizona State however long ago, and they are still best friends. And when we see these videos and interviews with Brandon Aiyuk, Jayden Daniels is right there. He's in the background of the podcast. He's in the background of the video. He's talking to Jayden Daniels in the videos, as we've seen in all these internet clips. Jayden Daniels is there with Brandon Aiyuk. So that is one thing, is that you would be pairing him up with one of his best friends. For the Commanders, this is great to be able to build around Jayden Daniels, to get him with a top-tier wide receiver. Again, best friends. They have this chemistry that hopefully they would be able to unlock in the NFL. And it would just make a ton of sense for the Commanders to try to make that happen. And again, they're not a contender. The Commanders are not a contender, so that makes sense for the 49ers to make that trade. And that would be just such a good offense for Jayden Daniels to start off in. You would have Terry McLaurin. You would have Brandon Aiyuk, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler. You got an offensive line that's not great, but it's better than last year, and I don't think it's going to be as bad as some people kind of see it to be. And that's not a bad situation for a rookie quarterback. There's definitely been worse. Look at Bryce Young last year. And one other thing, Adam Peters in the 49ers connection, the GM. So they have that connection there. Again, I don't know how much that really helps in negotiation talks, but it's there, and it's something I think we should at least note. And the Commanders would have the assets to trade for Brandon Aiyuk. Maybe a second-round pick, Diami Brown, maybe a Josh Dotson. Now, not a Josh Dotson, but a Jahan Dotson. I messed up Josh Dotson and Jahan, but Jahan Dotson. Now, I think that's a little bit worried. I don't know if I would do that right away. I would definitely have a think about it. But if I saw the Commanders got Brandon Aiyuk for a second-round pick and Jahan Dotson, I'm like, you're getting Brandon Aiyuk. That's not a bad trade. I think that's a pretty fair trade, and when it's all said and done. So they have the assets to the Commanders have the assets to make a move for Brandon Aiyuk, of course, and Brandon Aiyuk would fit perfectly in the Commanders offense. Again, of Terry McLaurin, this running back. Jayden Daniels. And it just would give Jayden Daniels so much more help. You got a guy that could really stretch the field downfield. He can play close to the line of scrimmage. That's what Brandon Aiyuk can really do. And then you have Terry McLaurin as that solid veteran guy that's going to be there open no matter what. So, again, that would be a great trade for the Commanders. Again, I think when we're talking about teams that could genuinely get Brandon Aiyuk, the Commanders are on the top of that list, either it be first, second, or third. So we had to talk about the Commanders. And then the second team is a team we've seen kind of Brandon Aiyuk in this team mentioned a lot, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, like I said, there's been a lot of interest shown from the Steelers for Brandon Aiyuk, and I think that honestly might be a more realistic spot for Brandon Aiyuk than the Commanders, actually, in a sense of if Brandon Aiyuk can be traded, I would put a bet on the Steelers and then the Commanders, if that makes sense. You would be pairing Brandon Aiyuk up with George Pickens. That would be such a dynamic and versatile receiving core right there with two of those guys, two of the best receivers in the NFL. Both of them can stretch the field. Both of them can play close to the line of scrimmage. You use yak and run after they got the ball in their hands. So that would be great for that offense. And you have the money, I would assume so, especially with Russell Wilson on that really low, minimal deal, as the Broncos are paying for all of that. And that would just help out that offense so much with a solid running game with Najee and Jalen Warren, a solid receiving core again with George Pickens. They got Pat Freiermuth, Calvin Austin, some other guys there, but that would really help take this offense to the next level, as we know their defense is good. They have a great defense, and again, getting Brandon Aiyuk would help out that offense, and hopefully they would be able to get to the playoffs and get past the first round and, genuinely put some pressures offensively versus the other teams that they're facing in the division, as that division is very, very hard. And then if they did make the playoffs, again, put pressure on the teams that they're playing, because their defense is really good, but you really need the offense to help out there, and that would completely complement that entire offense. Brandon Aiyuk would. And so that makes a ton of sense. You have the cap space, you have the picks. Again, I would assume if Brandon Aiyuk is going to get traded, it would be for a second round pick and maybe a player, or just like a second round pick and other picks. I don't think it would be a first round pick, especially now that the 49ers have kind of lost some leverage there, especially with him officially requesting a trade. And it's been well documented that they've been trying to get a contract done, and it just hasn't been working out. And supposedly they don't want him or whatever, what Brandon Aiyuk was talking to Jaden Daniels on that video call. So, when we talk about teams that could genuinely make a move for Brandon Aiyuk, the Steelers, in my opinion, are honestly on the top of that list, and then it's the Commanders. Now we're going to be talking about teams that I don't genuinely expect Brandon Aiyuk to get traded to, but there has been some rumors, and I could definitely see it fit, either it be for the need of wide receivers, or if I've seen other people talk about these teams. We're going to start it off with the Patriots, kind of in a similar situation with the Commanders, with the rookie quarterback situation with Drake May. Now they have a lot bigger need of wide receiver. I don't think their team in general is as good as the Commanders, and so that's a little difference when it talks about that. And again, we don't have that connection of Jaden Daniels and Brandon Aiyuk that we have with the Patriots. It's just not there, right? So obviously the Patriots have a huge wide receiver need. They made some moves this past offseason. I like some of the picks that they got: Javon Baker, Jalen Polk, good receivers, but definitely not Brandon Aiyuk. And bringing Brandon Aiyuk in would absolutely save their kind of drought they had of really good receivers, probably since Edelman retired. And when we talk about Brandon Aiyuk, he's a lot more dynamic than Julian Edelman, but obviously when you have Tom Brady, that helps out a lot. So again, Brandon Aiyuk would be definitely the best receiver they had in absolute years, and they've never been good at drafting receivers, but you wouldn't have to draft him. You would trade for him for, again, a second round pick, maybe a player, some other picks. And so that would obviously make a ton of sense for the Patriots to try to make that move for that elite receiver to help out Drake May in that offense initially, because I am a little scared with Drake May in that situation off the bat. I still think Drake May is going to be an absolute incredible quarterback, but again, with that situation in New England, I don't think it's as great. But Brandon Aiyuk would be there and kind of be that safety blanket for Drake May whenever he would be playing. If it's the start of the year, if it's the middle of the season, or even if it's in the year after, I don't know. I have no idea what the Patriots' plan are with that, but when we're talking about Brandon Aiyuk, they would have the cap space, they would have the assets to, again, then bring in Brandon Aiyuk to really help out Drake May in that offense. And so if we're talking about other teams in kind of like a similar situation, the Carolina Panthers, now they have spent a ton of money on an offensive line, and they definitely made some moves, getting, again, Xavier Legette in that receiving spot. They brought in Deontay Johnson, so I don't know if they're necessarily looking for a receiver, but they still have that need. You need to get players around Bryce Young, which they've done this season, but Brandon Aiyuk would absolutely take it to the next level when you talk about elite star players that the Panthers are trying to go for, and you would help out a young quarterback in Bryce Young that, again, struggled last year and wasn't entirely his fault, as he was in a terrible situation in Carolina. So you have that, and so again, I don't see it happening with the Panthers because of what they've done this offseason, addressing the offensive line, again, also addressing the receiver, but again, they still have that need. And if the Panthers made the move, I wouldn't be incredibly shocked. So again, I thought throwing it out there. I've seen some people talk about the Panthers. And another team I've seen people talk about that doesn't, I can't see it, is the Los Angeles Chargers. Again, we talk about that money situation. It's not, as bad. They let go of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, some other guys, but it just, again, I don't really fully know the money aspect of that. Maybe, I've seen people maybe say they put Joey Bosa in that trade with some picks, and that's a definitely interesting idea, with Nick Bosa also on the 49ers, but I do like their defensive line still in general, so I don't know if that would be the motivator for the 49ers entirely if Joey Bosa was part of that trade package. But again, back to the Chargers, they would absolutely need a receiver. Again, no Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams. They have Quentin Johnston, who had a really disappointing rookie year. They brought in Lad McConkey, that I absolutely love. I think that was a great pick there in the second round. But other than that, it's not great when we're talking about receivers in Los Angeles, and Brandon Aiyuk would come in there and absolutely be the wide receiver one, the number one player there for Justin Herbert. As again, the Chargers are trying to compete now. You paid Justin Herbert. You got to get the guys in to compete. You bring in Harbaugh this past offseason. So this would be an absolutely a win now move. I don't think Brandon Aiyuk makes them a Super Bowl contender, but this would absolutely incredibly help out their offense as they try to build around Justin Herbert, which they should be doing, and this would be that move to do that, right? So that's where I'm kind of standing on there. Now, I think also is would the Chargers trade for Brandon Aiyuk? I don't know, especially if they're not going for the receiver in the top half of the draft with the 5th, 6th overall pick, whatever they had. They went offensive lineman, but again, maybe they went offensive lineman to possibly make a move like this. Again, I don't see the Chargers getting Brandon Aiyuk, but I've seen people talk about it, and it definitely is an interesting idea, interesting kind of theory to throw out there as a team that could get Brandon Aiyuk. So with all that said, those are the teams that could be making a move for Brandon Aiyuk. Some of them I think are a little bit unrealistic, as these last three kind of were, but when we talk about the ones that I'm like, okay, there's a genuine chance, we're talking about the Commanders and we're talking about the Steelers mainly. There's been some other teams, I think the Broncos have been thrown out there. That could be a little interesting, right? Again, the Lions have been thrown out there, but I can't see the 49ers trading Brandon Aiyuk to the Detroit Lions. But also, I don't think Brandon Ayuk's going to get traded. I don't know if they're going to figure out a contract, but I just don't see Brandon Aiyuk being traded this offseason. If I'm the 49ers, I'm looking to trade Debo before I trade Brandon Aiyuk and then get that money to use for Brandon Aiyuk. Because Brandon Aiyuk is the better overall receiver, and he was one of their best players on offense last year. So that's what I think about this whole Brandon Aiyuk situation. What do you guys think? Do you think he actually gets traded? And if so, where to? Like the like button. Comment down below. Again, where do you think he's going to go? And subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.